everybody. Welcome back to Crime Chronicles with Mark Jones. Of course, I am Keone here with Mark Jones. And we have a guest from the conversation. Harold Ford is here with us. How you doing, Harold?
I'm
Hi,
great.
Harold.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you very much. So we're Black History Month is on the way. Thank you all of you who viewed the first episode, Amber Hagerman. Great response from that video. More type of videos like that to come. Black History Month is coming up, so we wanted to profile a couple of the cases that we did involving um, Black citizens. We didn't have that idea when we recorded them all, but me and Mark
Right.
just thought, hey, well, it's going to be Black History Month. Why don't we just put those in order? And the reason why I say that, Harold, is because the Amber Hagerman one, Mark, you'll have to explain it to him because I forgot. We
It
did
was
that one
it,
first,
it really
but
is uncanny. Now,
yeah,
Harold, and first off, Harold, you're coming from, is it Miami?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, at least you're warm. All right. Uh, well, what Keone is referring to is the Amber Hagerman episode aired on January 17th, 2 weeks ago. I had no idea that that was the day that Amber Hagerman's, unfortunately, her body was found on that
Mm,
very day. She disappeared 3 or 4 days earlier on January 13th, and her body was found January 17th. And it was just totally coincidental that we aired that episode on January 17th. And
wow.
as Keone said, we did the thing we're looking at here in a few minutes. We filmed this last summer, and Keone asked me to pick the topic. And I did, and I picked this one, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why after we view this little production thing. But at the time, we didn't really know when it was going to air,
hmm
and it's just and so as he said, February is approaching, so he and I agreed it would be this good. The timing would be good to air this episode. So
Yeah, I look forward to it.
yeah.
well, since you look forward to it, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
There is nothing a parent fears more than the disappearance of their child. There is nothing society fears more or loathes more than a person who would kill a child. In this segment, we take a look at the disappearance and the murder of 9-year-old Amber Hagerman in Arlington, Texas, and it happened in a parking lot like this one. It gave birth to something we all know very well when we pass down highways and see it, the Amber Alert System. Now, the Amber Alert System is an acronym, but it was based on an actual case that occurred in Arlington, Texas. So, in this segment, we take a look at the murder and unsolved mystery surrounding the death of Amber Hagerman.
All right, so go ahead. The first look. Don't laugh at me. The first show was flawless. All right, and then of course I go ahead and make a boo boo and don't switch out the second episode. So Mark, you go ahead and filibuster and talk, and I am going to get the next episode queued up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Federalist number 51, James Madison wrote, no, that's talking about filibustering. All right, let's talk about why I picked this. Now, first off, for the viewers who don't know, I have a PhD in criminal justice. I've been studying criminal justice now.
Oh, and then he freezes. No, we are off to a roaring good start today. A roaring good start. So Harold, you filibuster.
Oh my goodness! And see, again, I'm the one who doesn't have the topic, but I'm
No,
supposed to
no,
be
here we go.
responding to the topic.
Let's talk about why you're interested in hearing about this case from what you and I have read from what Mark has seen me. What and we've seen several different types of cases like this. This is also the case, by the way, that inspired the movie To Kill a Mockingbird. By the way, don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
I didn't know that. Okay. Well, I mean, the Scottsboro, you're speaking of the Scottsboro case, correct?
Yep, the Scottsboro Boys case.
Okay.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched videos and documentaries and things of that nature on this particular case in times past, not realizing all of the different things that have transpired in America's, I guess you could say, America's history. And sadly, we've seen and witnessed and now have even been able to go back and research the accounts of many of these uh, travesties of justice, where an individual can be allegedly or accused of doing something, and then the overarching response by the community in which that allegation was made was grave in many cases. Because again, when you have, for example, using an analogy or an example, the accusation that spurred the Tulsa race massacre, the
Hmm.
accusations that spurred what transpired in Rosewood and other places. So again, this is nothing different than almost what those times were like for Black people in America, and what would transpire if you were accused of committing a crime against someone. So it's interesting to learn, because again, it teaches us of where we came from, and how far we've come.
Yes, I
Yes,
can hear you.
welcome home.
It's retrograde. I've had 4 shows today, and we've had all kinds of things happening. But while I get your camera, go ahead and fix. We're going to get into the correct episode, so we don't have to watch the Amber Hagerman one again, even though that was a great one.
The history of American criminal justice is riddled with examples of racial discrimination against African Americans. And no case so encapsulates that injustice than one that happened in the 1930s in Alabama. It's the case of the Scottsboro Boys of the Scottsboro 9. 9 young African American men riding the rails on a railroad track like this one in Alabama were accused of raping 2 white women. Did the crime occur? What happened? And more importantly, what else was at stake in this case? Was it the crime itself, or were there greater issues involved on both sides of the equation? That's what we'll take a look at in the case of the Scottsboro Boys of the Scottsboro 9. What happened in the case of the Scottsboro 9 of the Scottsboro Boys? It was the early 1930s, and America was in the throes of the Great Depression. Millions of people were out of work. Poor people became even poorer. Hoboing, or riding the rails, was a popular pastime among people who didn't have a job or among petty criminals running from the law. Well, that was the case with a train that left Chattanooga, Tennessee, bound for Memphis, Tennessee. Along the way, it dipped down into northern Alabama. Now, on this one car, there were several Caucasian men and several African American men, as well as 2 Caucasian or white women. Now, a fight broke out on the railroad car. The black men threw the white men off the train. Well, at least that was what was said. Now, the white men who were thrown off the train arrived in Scottsboro, Alabama before the rail car did, and they told authorities what they said had happened. When police officers were waiting on the train, when it passed through Scottsboro, they detained or arrested every African American man on that train, including 9 young men, 4 of whom knew each other prior, all of whom except one were illiterate, and they ranged in age from 14 to 19 years old. Now, the 2 white women who were aboard the train, along with a white man, the white women en route to the police station reported that the 9 young African American men had raped both of them. And that set in motion the case of the Scottsboro Boys, or the Scottsboro 9.
hear you.
Okay.
All right, all right. We've seen that. We've got the gist of what's happened with that. So, Mark, go ahead. Take us in.
All right. Well, and I misspoke on a couple of things as far as the age range goes. Some of the men may have been in their early 20s, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure that even the authorities were sure at that time. And uh,
Well, you
the
can't really fault you for that because back then, and everybody knows, people were so wishy washy about their
right,
age.
yeah,
Back then.
Records were fully kept.
yeah,
Yep.
right. And they were, and especially with poor people, and they were. But anyway, they were teens and young adults. And the train actually stopped in a town called Stevenson, Alabama, which is just up the road or down the road, whatever, from
Mhm.
Scottsboro. And as I said in the video, and actually, I believe one of the women en route to the police station said they had been raped. I don't believe they both made that claim, at least not initially. Well, as I don't know if I said this in the video or not. I know I've said it before. Immediately, more was at stake than just whether or not this rape had occurred, and or who all may have been guilty of it. The other white man who was not thrown off the train was a man named Orville Gilley. Don't really know what his side of the story was, and I believe that somewhere in one of these slides, the names of the 9 young men who were detained or arrested are mentioned. But Ruby Bates was 17 years old, and Victoria Price was 24. Victoria Price was the primary accuser here. She was the one who claimed that they had been raped. Well, as anyone who knows the criminal justice system knows, uh, is rape is sometimes a very difficult case to prove. First off, one has to prove that a sexual act did occur, and usually that's not terribly difficult, although sometimes it is. But more often than not, the thing that's harder to prove, is whether or not the act was consensual. And in the justice system we have, it falls on the prosecution, it falls on the accuser to prove that the act was not consensual. And so that was really what was at stake here. Were these women telling the truth? But as we all know, the reason this case has gained such notoriety was it was not just another rape case, although it was pretty common for people convicted of rape back in that time, particularly in some states, to face the death penalty. But what was at stake here was, John, I believe, let's see, I'm not sure if it's in one of the slides or not. Um, if you scroll down about 3 or 4 slides, and there's a flag of the state of Alabama there, this title, "What Was at Stake?"
Yep. I'm on that one.
Okay,
Mhm.
and as it says here, forgive me if I sound like I'm reading, but racial purity and supremacy was at stake. Separation of the races, especially keeping black men away from white women.
So
And
if you stop right there on that one, because I see what you're saying. What's at stake? Because just like we have this happening today, something happens and we use that as fear mongering. Hey, this is what happens when you put us in the same vicinity, right?
yeah,
That's something that can be used, and that's what's at stake.
well, a lot of cases, when I say a lot of cases, there are a
Mhm.
few cases actually in which what actually happened may take a back seat to a higher issue or to a separate issue
Yeah.
or to a companion issue. And that's what was going on here. Unfortunately, and I think that both sides in this argument were kind of guilty of this, or it's just the way it was. Uh, Another agenda came about, and the initial agenda was as it says here in the slide, some people may be able to see the racial purity and supremacy,
Uh-huh.
and kind of preserving Southern culture, if you will, and that meant keeping white women away from black men. And then on the other side of the equation, there are people who got involved in a situation and also saw it as something much bigger. Uh, but what they saw was something, it shone a light on a very tragic element of Southern culture or American culture that needed to be changed. And this was a good vehicle to try to effect that change or at least shine a light on it. So, and as I said, this is a message had to be sent. And this is one of those cases where you send the message to the defendants as well in this case as any other black men in the South or any other black men in America that if you even think about doing something like this is what's going to happen.
Because I see the last one, the bullet at the bottom, Harold. It says, "No one wanted to concede the possibility that two white women would voluntarily have sex with black men." So when you cut out, Mark, Harold, we were talking about other cases, and we talked about how this spurred the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, but we talked about Rosewood and how, something that could be, and that wasn't consensual, it didn't happen, but we've seen the cases where it consensually happened, and you have to, once you're caught, you have to say, what? I was raped. Because that would be you being raped, a white woman being raped by a black person at that time was a lot more redeemable than her saying, I consensually had sex.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, of course, she'd be pushed out of the community if anyone thought that she was willful in the act of, engaging with a person of color.
And it's also possible that they were paid for this act. If you get my drift.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even consider that.
I mean,
They were
consider
actors.
this. Yeah, that. And this is not blaming the victim. Now, I'm not
Mhm.
putting it that way, but I'm not really sure why these two young women would be on the train in the first place, if that might not be the idea that they had, and that they would do this with whoever men happened to be on the freight car with them.
So the women weren't just riding the riding the rails.
Well,
Uh,
don't really know. I don't really know. I mean, but
Mhm.
all these people were doing something illegal.
Okay.
Riding the rails was illegal. Hoboing like that was illegal. And so it was something that, as I said in my little video there, that people who were looking for work, or perhaps down on the luck in some other ways, or perhaps running from the law, or perhaps committing petty crimes. It's also possible that this was a way of women earning a living, if you will, by engaging in acts of prostitution
Mhm.
with men who happen to ride the rails as well.
Well, I mean, not to put light on it and be funny, but I mean, it was illegal, but it's still better than walking.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. Well, and again, I don't mean just because someone does
Yeah,
committed this illegal act does not mean they
yeah,
go around raping people,
right.
or doing stuff that's worse. But
Um, One of the things when we say bigger things at stake, because we always know that we have the racial component. We everybody by now gets it. The South that time, what's happening? If you don't, you're just doing it on purpose, right? But one of the things was at stake was how the justice system would continually evolve. And so I'm looking at the slide you have up, and it says first trial. The 9 defendants did not have counsel.
yes, there are a lot of lessons to be learned about this case, or a lot of things that can be studied. Now, first off, if you strip away, which I know you can't do, but if you strip away the racial component here, which I know is key, but if you just strip that away and look at this uh, from a legal standpoint, there were some legal atrocities committed here, but they were more pronounced in a case like this because of the nature of the case, because of the sexual nature, and because of interracial nature. The 9 defendants did not have counsel. I mean, just picture this today. You have people facing 9 people facing a crime that carries a possible life sentence or 20 years, a lot of time, and do not have counsel. That would not be allowed today. About 30 years later, in the 1960s, the Supreme Court said that anyone facing a substantial prison sentence as a result of conviction of a crime is entitled to counsel. Well, this goes back a little further than that, and that anyone facing a potential death sentence would also be entitled to counsel. And rape is no longer a capital offense. The Supreme Court declared that a person cannot be executed for the crime of rape unless it accompanies murder, of course. They declared that in the 1970s. It's also worth mentioning here, I think, if you're looking at the same slide as I am, that this occurred, the trial occurred within a month of these guys being arrested, which would be unfathomable by modern standards. It was
That's
an
a
all white,
speedy trial.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, justice was more swift then than it is now. There's no question about
Most
that.
definitely.
Even in serious cases, but not this swift.
Yeah.
The idea here is that we're not trying to be fair. We're trying to send the message that if, and to repeat myself, if there is the remotest chance that you did this, don't expect fairness. Expect swift, certain, severe punishment. And whether you did it or not is not really material. It's whether you might have done it or not. And as it says here, 8 of these 9 guys were convicted and sentenced to death. The ninth person, who I believe is the one pictured here,
Hmm.
was only 13 years old at the time. And the jury was deadlocked, not on whether he was guilty or not. They'd already decided he was guilty, but whether or not to sentence him to death since he was only 13 years old. They had that little measure of compassion. But other than
I,
that, no.
I cannot fathom going into a trial of this relevance and already knowing that I'm not just nothing I can do. There's
Right.
nothing I can say. Nothing, it's not a movie. I can't make some, final closing argument as an illiterate person that has no idea
Yeah.
what's happening to defend myself. I can't imagine the emotions of sitting through that.
Well, like I said, but again, I know, yeah, certainly you can't imagine, but John and Harold, I mean, we're educated guys. Uh, Try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is illiterate, who can't even. You hold a piece of paper in front of their hands and they can't even read it. So think how lost they must have felt in this process. So
Mhm.
that aspect of this case was not terribly unusual, and very unfortunately, having illiterate black men on trial for all sorts of crimes, and having swift convictions and show trials presided over by all white court personnel and all white juries. And I don't know this for sure, but it might be a safe bet that all or most of the jurors were men as well, because and it just wasn't very, now women had the right to vote at that time and all throughout the United States, but still a lot of women were not registered to vote and therefore did not serve on juries.
Well, I was
So
also told by a law expert friend of mine that even if they were in cases like this, they would try not to put women on there because even if a woman was purposely being unfair, because of the racial component, that it's easier. It was believed that it's easier to turn a woman's heart than it is a man, no matter if the racial component is there.
yeah, I mean, they're because I'm not a jury consultant
Mhm.
or a jury expert, but that that's a point of view that is out there. It's very likely that the prosecution. I don't think it really mattered who they put on the jury, but
Yeah.
if you've seen a jury selected, I mean, think about it for a second. What a farce this was. You had the prosecution going through the voir dire process, questioning potential jurors. Well, did the judge, in all seriousness, turn to these 9 defendants and say, "Do you have any questions to these potential jurors? I mean, do you want to strike certain people or anything like that?" I mean, just what a joke it must have been.
Mm.
Well, I mean, and also noting that during this time that there are many instances in history or throughout history where some of these alleged defendants would not have even made it to a trial
Absolutely.
because they would have been burst out of jail
Yeah.
or allowed to be extracted from jail and lynched.
That
So
almost happened here, although I guess
Mm.
fortunately, I'll say this one thing. This is one of the few cases we're going to look at in these podcasts where at least there was no loss of life. Uh, and so, but the governor of Alabama, I believe, was the one who, and probably notified by the mayor or something, who did receive word that this was going on, and so they were at least saved from that fate, Harold. But as you said, though, yeah, it would not have been uncommon or surprising if what you just said would have happened.
Mm. So, what is the relevance of the Communist Party slide?
Well, and uh, in one of these video clips that's in this slide, it's embedded in this slide. This
Mhm.
guy talks about the history of the Communist Party as it relates to this case. What I found a bit surprising is that the NAACP, which, and Harold, you know this better than me, I think was only about say 15, 20 years old. It wasn't very well established. probably more established in some parts of the country than it was others. But their reluctance to kind of get involved here at first, because although they went around the court kind of, picking the cases they thought would best support their cause or reinforce their messages, that type of thing, they didn't pick this one right away. And on the surface, this one seems like it's one of those cases that just cries out for this kind of involvement. And so the first entity outside of Alabama to get involved in this was the Communist Party, and via their proxy, the International Labor Defense, or ILD organization. And that caused some complications, although they provided some very capable defense for these guys, which was very sorely needed. A lot of people who even were supportive, first off, people who did not support civil rights hated communists too. But even some people who sympathized with the Scottsboro Boys and who supported civil rights and equal rights, including some members of the NAACP, were a bit uneasy about getting into bed with communists. Communism was gaining strength in the United States in the 1930s. Remember, people were broke, out of work, and poor, and so communism gained a foothold among some of the poorer classes in the U.S. And they saw this as an opportunity to take advantage of the racial division that existed in the United States and to promote their cause as well. And to some degree, they were successful. Now, Harold, you're the NAACP expert here, so perhaps you can. I mean,
I don't know whether to take that as a compliment for you or an insult to me.
Take either way, they both fit.
But the NAACP was became active in 1909. That's when it was founded.
Okay.
And so 20 plus years, obviously, getting involved or jumping in, and it was the actual Springfield, Illinois riots that got them organized and moving forward. But one of the practices of the NAACP back in those days is they would not take the initial case because they already knew it was going to lose. And they would end up taking up the case on appeal in many instances because they knew it would be in a different jurisdiction, most likely on a federal level, before it either eventually had to go to the Supreme Court. So that was one of the strategies that they learned in taking up different cases early on, in the early 1910s, in the teens, and so forth. But as these different cases came along, they had to find out, okay, well, wait a minute. If we know we're not going to win when we go initially to court. We know that.
Right.
But if we go ahead, let it play out, see what their arguments are, see what their weaknesses are, study the case, and then we can come back. Because even in this case, it was kicked out, I think, overturned by the Supreme Court because these individuals didn't have legal representation at the very beginning, and they had to be retried or something.
Yeah, that takes down a whole other rabbit hole. But like you said, and plus, the NAACP also had their hands full with just making sure that people got to trial, as you indicated a while ago, because lynching was very common. And so, and again, I'll defer to you as the expert here, but the NAACP also had its hands full combating lynching, extrajudicial killings, like we talked about a while ago.
Yes.
Which, by the way, is still not a federal crime, if I'm correct.
What, lynching?
There was mention of a few years ago, and it's through John Lewis or a few other congressmen who were trying to pass anti-lynching bill some years ago, and I don't remember if it got passed or not, or what may have transpired when that was.
I think the funny thing about that conversation, because I heard it on the Joe Madison show, and I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm sitting here going, wait, that's still a thing? Yeah. So.
Well, my take on that is I think that's one of those things that's just got overlooked. It kind of went away without needing legislation, but other than that, I'm speaking in ignorance. Yeah. So, but Harold mentioned a while ago about the appeals process. That's when things really got interesting. And I know this will put the audience to sleep if I go into too much detail here.
Do it in the charismatic Mark Abe Vigoda way.
Abe Vigoda. I never lived that one down. Abe Vigoda. Mike, can you get me off the hook? Can you get for old time's sake? Not Mike. Tom.
Tom.
Yeah. Can you get me off the hook?
That's a Godfather reference. Anybody out there who hasn't seen that movie?
Well, okay. Now the appeals process goes something. We're trying to get too detailed here.
Yeah.
But by March of 1932, fortunately, these guys survived. They were not taken out and lynched right away, which is what happens sometimes. There was a case in Texas back in 1916 where the guy was tried and taken out and executed right then, as soon as he was convicted. Well, here the world was really, particularly the United States, was really looking at Alabama. So now, even though they're stubborn and they're determined to get these guys executed and uphold the convictions, now they can't take them out and execute them at least. So in March of 1932, the convictions of 7 of the guys were upheld, and a retrial was ordered for one of the men, Eugene Williams, because he was a minor. He was probably the 13-year-old, I'm not sure. And then by November of 1932, the U.S. Supreme Court in Powell, one of the guys, versus Alabama, they ruled that the 14th Amendment was violated because the group was denied counsel. And so the Supreme Court, in a 7-2 decision, what the other two were thinking, I don't know. But
they were like, we can't make it a clean sweep. That sends the wrong message.
And I haven't read the opinion, so I should keep my mouth shut, but I'll say something anyway. After all, it's my show, right? But they said, okay, the 14th Amendment was violated. Now, something else was going on here. A legal doctrine was at stake, other than all the social issues and even the right to counsel we're talking about here. And it's something called the incorporation debate. The incorporation debate, although it's not a debate anymore, was a debate as to whether or not the tenets of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and so forth, whether those applied to the states, because we still were in a states' rights battle back in those days, even though the Civil War had been ended over 60 years ago. There was still some debate about whether the Supreme Court holdings or the tenets of the Constitution overrode the elements or the content of a state constitution. So it's just possible, and I'm not defending it by any means, but it's just possible that the 2 dissenting votes weren't so much saying these guys didn't get a raw deal and should have had counsel, but that perhaps Alabama should be left to govern the affairs in Alabama and we should stick to other matters. Possibly, I don't know.
Oof.
I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, it's still remarkable at that time, even though, it shouldn't have gotten that far, that you did have people sitting on the Supreme Court that says, hey, look, I don't care if you're racist, the law is the law. Yeah. And this was an atrocity. So
absolutely.
So
well, and so the case.
Do you know why? I know why they retried. They did it for the minor, but do you know why Eugene was the only one picked out of the rest of them?
No, I don't honestly. I just got to believe that there may have been a stronger case against some of the defendants than against some of the others.
Okay. Was he the one that was literate? I'm not saying that to be funny. I would find that interesting. Okay.
Don't know. I have no idea. Well, okay. Any case, so now the legal circus continues, and fortunately for these guys, and fortunately for the cause of justice. And so it's a separate. And one thing that was also noteworthy about the first trial is that all 9 men, or all young men, were tried together, and so now separate trials ensue. And that makes things even more complicated. Now, a second trial, a change of venue was granted, and so it was moved to Decatur, Alabama. I'm not sure where that is in relation to Scottsboro. And what's interesting here is that Ruby Bates, who was 17 at the time this thing occurred in 1931, she recanted her testimony, and she testified for the defense. And a medical examiner was brought in, and I'm not sure exactly what evidence he used or what testimony he gave, but he refuted the idea that a rape had actually occurred. But nonetheless, this guy, Haywood Patterson, was again convicted and sentenced to death, again by an all-white jury.
Okay, wait, hold on. Pause right there.
Yeah.
Because I got to backtrack to this. Change of venue. Victim recants statement, testifies for the defense.
Yeah.
Medical examiner refutes rape. And still conviction.
Absolutely.
How is that even possible? We know how it's possible. I'm being devil's advocate.
Right. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I mean,
it didn't matter.
Right. Exactly. It didn't matter. It didn't matter, Harold. But there was one voice of fairness here. The presiding judge, a guy named James Horton, even after the conviction of this guy, Patterson, He said that it's very, people don't realize that the first step in an appeals process, if a person is convicted, you don't go straight to an appellate court. You go to the original presiding court. But that's very seldom granted because it's effectively asking a judge to overturn him or herself.
To say they
Well,
were wrong. Yeah.
to say, yeah, to say
Yeah.
the trial I presided over was wrong, and so that very seldom succeeds. But it's the first necessary step. But that's what this guy did. He thought that there was a miscarriage of justice had occurred at a trial that he had oversaw, and he ordered a new trial. And his reward for that was being defeated in his reelection bid the next year.
No surprise there.
You know, it's funny. Everybody, these movies are so powerful, and it's like people. These movies are based off of true stories. Like you couldn't write that in a script. What I'm reading on this page.
Well, it's like
I mean, you could write it.
because you've already mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird. You
Mhm.
see Gregory Peck up there.
Yeah.
In the name of God, do your duty. But it
You
doesn't
dare
work.
make a mockery of Mr. Peck.
Yeah.
You stand up when he's leaving the courtroom. Okay.
Do you-
No, not to make funny of it, but we have fun on here. But I'm just this slide out of everything takes me out. The change of venue, victim recants, testifies on the behalf of the defense, medical examiner refutes the rape, and it's like, we don't give a crap.
Well, and it keeps on. If you go to the
Yeah.
next one, in late 1933, the Mr. Patterson and Clarence Norris were convicted again and sentenced to death. And by this time, the IDF lawyer Samuel Leibowitz has become kind of a mini celebrity, and of course hated in Alabama. No doubt, a Jew, quite frankly, a Jewish communist.
Now wait a minute. So not the Jewish communist part. I get that, but here's the thing I do want to say. I do give, like we're saying, I can't imagine sitting in the courtroom in that day and time being a black person that knew I was going to get railroaded anyway. I also can't imagine being the white guy in that environment that's doing the unpopular thing.
Yeah.
That's something I can't, I don't want to leave just understated as well.
Right. I can't, and again, as I said, we're the three of us are seeing this through different sets of eyes. So let's keep it real. But although I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, I was raised in the basic idea that you love your neighbor and that you try to treat people fairly.
Mhm.
There had to be someone in that room who was making this decision. A voice inside them was saying, "What I'm doing is wrong," but they could not go against the tide. That they could not or would not.
Yeah.
Lord knows what kind of pressure they would have faced as well. I'm not saying that excuses it, but well, the case went to the Supreme Court again, and this time the named plaintiff or defendant, I should say, was Norris. And here you have the Chief Justice Charles Evans Hughes. This time they overturned convictions because of jury composition, because black people were systematically excluded from jury roles in those days, and therefore they were excluded from jury service. So, we're supposed to be entitled to a trial by jury of our peers,
Yeah.
but we're not exactly sure what constitutes a peer. But in this case, the Supreme Court said that rule is clearly in violation here. And then by this time, the NAACP had joined forces with the IDF and formed the what was called the Scottsboro Defense Committee.
I can also this is taking up time, and it's not like they're waiting in summer camp while all these appeals are happening.
Right.
They're living a very harsh existence.
Well, and that takes us to the next point, and that is in 1936, Patterson was convicted for a fourth time, but this time he was sentenced to 75 years. He was not sentenced to death. So things are calming down a little bit. All right, but now what you just said about these guys were not in summer camp, Ozzie Powell, I don't know if you have that slide up or not, John. While he was at while he was not at camp, as you say,
there we go.
He attacked the deputy sheriff with a knife, and Powell was shot in the head, but both men survived. And then Norris was tried for a third time and sentenced to death again. Oh, good Lord. Andy Wright and Charles Weems were convicted and sentenced to prison, not death, but to prison. The rape charge against Ozzie Powell was dropped, but he was sentenced to 20 years because now he's assaulted the deputy.
Which I was watching a case on a channel the other day, and a lady was going to go to prison because she was driving on a suspended license. But the judge was like, well, the reason why her license is suspended is because an officer lied on a report about a DUI, and that's why her license was suspended. She wouldn't have been driving on a suspended license if the lie didn't happen. So the judge threw it out.
Yeah.
And now you have this. Well, okay, you're innocent, but while you're in jail falsely, you attacked the deputy.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're going to get you anyway.
Well, and the saga went on, but slowly things begin to. I don't know if the people in Alabama are responding to public pressure, or if
Mhm.
there's a book. One of the first books I read in graduate school is one called Popular Justice, by Samuel Walker, and where he talks about how the passions of popular justice and the mob justice mentality and the damage that that's done, and over and over and over again throughout history, irrespective of racial issues, anything like that, how passions tend to calm down over time, even though the prejudice did not go away. We're not saying that. Well, then I had to put the glasses on for this one. Sorry, but prosecutors dropped the rape charges against 4 remaining defendants, and these 4 guys were released. In 1938, Governor Bibb Graves of Alabama commuted Norris's death sentence to life imprisonment. So nobody's facing the death sentence now, a death penalty, I should say. But he refused to pardon the other people, so he kept them locked up. But 4 of the men were eventually paroled. Patterson, who was still locked up, escaped in 1948, and something else happened.
This was the most interesting to me. The one you're about to read.
He is fleed. Is that a word? He
Fled.
fled. There you go.
Hey, he's the college professor, everybody, and not me at home. He's the college
Yeah.
professor.
He fleeted. How about that?
Fleeted.
He fleed
He fledded.
on it. Did he fleed it on his feet? Was he on his feet?
Past tense of fled. Fledded.
He fledded on his fleeted to Detroit, to Michigan, and he was picked up in Michigan as an escaped prisoner. But the governor, I believe I have a picture of the governor of Michigan here. I'm not sure if this is Michigan or Alabama, actually. Kim Sigler said no, and that was something that also went on throughout the 20th century.
That is interesting to me.
Yeah, a number of. I mean, this happened in my home state of Georgia once, where a governor of a state outside the South refused to approve extradition for a black defendant back to a southern state, and of course, the reasons he refused this were obvious. But
I want to get into that because you'll know this better than me. So I'm not talking about today, but he flees, gets caught in Michigan.
Yeah.
And if that governor refuses to extradite, he's safe as long as he stays in Michigan.
Correct. Yes.
I guess he probably never left the state. I'm not going to see a family member. I'm not going to see anything.
No.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a case totally unrelated to this one, but it was the basis of a popular movie and a book. The movie came out in the 1930s. I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, in which a guy from Georgia escaped. He had gotten a raw deal at the hands of this was a white guy, for what it's worth. He had gotten a raw deal at the hands of the justice system, and he fled to. Notice I got it right that time. He fled to I think New Jersey, New York, and but he was extradited, but he got double crossed. But if so usually extradition matters are pro forma. Very seldom will a court refuse to extradite somebody back to another state.
Can the federal government step in if a state refuses to extradite somebody?
I don't know. But I want to say no, but I don't want to be wrong. Right. But for the most part, though, no. Now, I suppose that if the governor refuses to extradite someone, that the prosecution could go over the head to the federal court. But I don't know. I don't want to say anymore and be wrong.
No, that's fine. Hey, this is we're not a news station. We don't just say things. If we don't know, we don't have a fear of saying I don't know.
Yeah, and what Patterson's tale gets sorrier. He was while he was living in Michigan, he was convicted of manslaughter, entirely separate case, and he died from cancer in 1952. Norris was pardoned by Governor George Wallace, who we all know is a whole other story, in 1976. He was the last one to die, died in 1989. And then the remaining defendants were posthumously pardoned in 2013. Now, of course, we could do a whole segment on George Wallace, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And the irony of George Wallace stepping in and doing something on these guys' behalf because he was the face of segregation in the
Mhm.
1960s.
Right, but if we recall, in 1976, George Wallace, I was going to say George Washington, George Wallace also had a presidential bid.
Yes,
So trying to overcome the stigma that he already had attached to him, imparting these three was part of that process.
could have been. Yeah, he was, and he
Mhm.
was, he was shot in 1972
Mhm.
during a presidential bid, and he was wheelchair bound by this point. But again, it's kind of an entirely separate discussion.
It's
Uh, I think what's interesting, and John Keone, not John, has already alluded to this, but the impact on popular culture here, and that is, it inspired, as you said, Harper Lee. Although the narratives are somewhat different, it
yeah.
inspired Harper Lee, an Alabama native, I believe, to write *To Kill a Mockingbird*, which is made into a movie with Gregory Peck, uh, and it also inspired a musical, which I have not seen.
With
And for
mustard.
you blues fans out there who remember this guy who by the name Leadbelly
Yeah.
also performed a song in homage to this case.
Biscuit and that. Yeah. Mm.
It's it's truly sad that this is part of our dark history in America. But it's also um, I guess refreshing to learn of and become informed of, so that hopefully we can now know what mistakes that we shouldn't make, and hopefully we can see how far we've come moving things forward in America. But
Yeah, I'd say
prayerfully,
both legally, just in pure legal terms, as well as I think what you're getting at is for lack of a better word, the social elements of this, the
Mhm.
racial elements of this.
Especially when it comes, for instance, you just look at something as recently as the Ahmaud Arbery trial. When we're, watching the jury selection, making sure it's in Brunswick, Georgia, making sure it's a jury of peers, meaning everyone that's, what's the word I'm looking for, represented in that community, you know, and that could be, and I mean, that's also not only racial, but gender. I wouldn't be a woman on trial and have just 12 male jurors. uh, I wouldn't want to be a man on trial for domestic violence accusations against my wife, and then you look in the jury box and it's 12 women.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so
Well, I don't want to be on trial for anything.
no, I'm saying no. You know what? Hey, but hey, there
Exactly. Yeah.
as we talk about
Put me on trial for that. Yeah.
no, but look, the whole thing we're talking about is in Pedro on his show on the count. We've talked to a lot of prisoners in jail that shouldn't have been in there in the first place. So I don't want to be on trial either. But I
but,
have a lot of more people who weren't supposed to be don't want to be on
but
trial either.
to one of the points that Mark brought up earlier, has it clearly been defined what a peer is? Is it racial? Is it gender? Is it,
Age.
what is a peer?
Yeah. That's
Because again, we don't know. In certain segments, or certain areas, they're going to be clearly defined much differently, and or either just totally ignored.
well,
Yeah,
yeah. And
you know what,
again, I don't have the
Mark.
answer to that. I know, but let's say, I mean, age is a common one because very often criminal defendants are very young, but
Mhm.
yet the jury pool is typically quite a bit older. So you may have an 18-year-old being
Hmm.
tried by 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds. I'm not,
Hey, there's your best
sometimes,
friend,
yeah.
Mark Greg Weenie. There's your best friend
Oh, hi,
saying, "Good
Winnie.
point, great show, guys." Oh my God. Well, I was just about to give the example. Mark wouldn't, even though he doesn't want to be on trial, Mark wouldn't want to be on trial and look up and it's a jury box full of 20-year-olds.
No, no.
They're all texting while he's trying to prove his point.
Hey,
Especially if Greg is one of them. It's
pay
just,
attention. Pay
Oh,
it's
attention.
payback would be hell in his case.
hey, you know what? No, sadly, that would probably be the fairest trial you'd ever get if it was a bunch of 20-year-olds. Actually, that would I'd probably feel way more comfortable than if it was a
As
bunch of.
long as
I
long
don't
as
know.
they don't know I'm a college professor and they're college students, then I'm a dead
Matter of
man.
fact, that's what the jury box is going to be, past
Yeah,
students.
yeah. They can bit me a peeping tom if I did that. Probably.
So,
I don't
you
think.
said,
And by the way, I think it's not peeping if you love the person. So I don't
oh
know.
my
Yeah.
God.
Oh wow.
So, some questions to ask yourselves that you put on here. What really happened? Did the truth about what happened get lost? Were the women lying, or were the two rape victims abused by the system? and media? Was the entire incident fabricated? We're talking about media even back to that day, right?
Right.
If so, why? Or was the price telling the truth? Why did Bates change her testimony? While it was unlikely that all 9 were guilty of raping 2 women, did someone do something? Had it been just one to 3 defendants instead of 9, had they not all been so young, would they have either been executed or sentenced to long prison terms? No one would have noticed. You know what? That's a good question too. If
Yeah.
they were all 30, 40 years old, it probably would have been done
If
hook, line, and
yeah,
sinker.
look, if this had been one guy or 2 guys, uh, and had it not been something that was just so starkly outrageous,
Mhm.
uh, they would have been executed or sentenced to life in prison, and no one would have known.
Hmm.
I have no doubt about that.
Also, because no one's busting out a rape kit back then.
Yeah.
Like you posed the question, hey, what if they did have? There's so many because you just don't know who's lying. Who
Yeah.
They could have had consensual sex, and then the 2 white men found out, and then that might have been the cause of the fight.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, but someone may know, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy. What we do know is everything was done wrong legally, from the time of the accusation all the way through. And it's just sad that even though they didn't get death sentences, their entire life was stolen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Off of it not working.
Yeah.
And cases like this, I'll hear people say, well, they got it right in the end. Okay, yeah, you pardoned me posthumously. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Well, they got it right in the rear end, I mean, so yeah, that's small consolation, but at least there was no loss of life in this case. That's the one consolation we have. And some of the issues that were brought up here didn't totally go away, but at least they were addressed and corrected, at least to a certain degree.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but some people will say, we always express our opinions. When we say there's no loss of life, hell, if I spend 70 something years in jail, that's a loss of life for me.
True. Yeah.
Because, even when we see today that someone gets found innocent, that's been claiming they're innocent because new DNA or whatever, and now, they were arrested at 19 and they're getting out at 52.
Right. Yeah.
The world is nowhere near.
It's a tragedy. Yes, no question about it.
I think Shawshank Redemption showed it the most. Remember the old guy? He finally got paroled, and he went out into the world, and he seemed happy for 2 seconds, and then he hung himself.
Yeah,
because
Yeah.
I guess
imagine going in jail in like 1989 and coming out today.
Well, you prompted me. I guess you don't want to hear the Morgan Freeman imitation, huh?
Oh Lord.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't have a very good one. I just rehabilitated. Let me see. I have no idea what that means. I know what you think it means, Sonny. You know that. It sounds just like it sounds a lot like Gregory Peck, actually.
So Mark, give us a preview of the wait, hold on. Let me make sure we're all done here.
Yeah, make sure we get it right next time we start off Keone.
All right. Well, what I want to do is I kind of want to.
You want to tease it for next time?
First, I want to get this off screen. You said what?
I said, you want to tease it for the next episode?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about what we got coming up for this next one.
All right.
Do you remember?
Yes, I remember because you told me.
Right. Oh.
What we're going to look at again. This is consistent with Black History Month. Although at the time I didn't realize it was going to air in February. Time is just coincidental. And this is one that's not nearly as well known, at least to people outside North Carolina. In 1870, during the period of Reconstruction after the Civil War, there was a man named Wyatt Outlaw who lived in Graham, that's Alamance County, North Carolina. He was a constable, a black constable, which was not a very popular thing among the residents of Graham, at least the white residents. And make a long story short, not to get the whole story away, in 1870, out near the courthouse in Graham, North Carolina, he was lynched by the emerging KKK in that county. So that's the episode for next time. It is a very interesting case, and it leads to some other issues as well.
Okay, so we're doing Wyatt, and then we're doing Chicken Stevens, right?
I believe that's the plan, yeah.
Okay. I got it written backwards then.
Yeah, White Outlaw is much more in keeping with Black History Month than the other case.
Yeah. All right. Sweet.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, Harold, thank you for joining us. If you guys
Thank you,
want to see
Harold.
more of Harold talking, you can catch him
My
on the
pleasure.
conversation. It comes on Wednesdays, twice a month. Sometime Mark stops by to give his opinion.
Yep. Which
him
is
and
like
his,
a which is
him
like
and
a
his,
like a butthole. Everybody's got one, but I just say no.
him and his best friend Larry. So
Love them.
So, right. Thank you for another great episode, guys. Keep looking for more episodes of conversation. We're also going to load the episode in its purity without the live, so you'll get both versions. Everybody, enjoy your night. Great show. We'll see you soon.
Deuces.